Well, for more, I'm joined now in the studio by TRT World's Middle East correspondent, Iolo. Dafydd. Thanks so much for coming in, Iolo. There had been tensions before, but this has escalated very quickly. What do you think actually pushed this to this extreme today?
Well, if we see what's being said by the state news agencies of the different countries, I mean, first of all, it's coordinated, and that's been quite dramatic because it's escalated very quickly. Now, when you look at what's being said by, for instance, the Saudis from their state agency, SPA, what they're saying is that there's a multiple terrorist and sectarian groups aimed at destabilizing the region, and Qatar is involved in that. You look at what Abu Dhabi's news agency says, that Doha is supporting, funding and embracing terrorism. Egypt, you know, another very influential player in the Middle East, saying that this is where Arab national security, where the threat of security has been sowed in terms of what Doha and Qatar is doing. So the accusations are very, very serious indeed for Qatar to respond to. And finally, they've also reiterated again this scepter of Iran, that Iran is one of the reasons that why they're not happy with the line taken by Qatar, that they see Iran as being a very, very influential and destabilizing power in the Middle East and a rising power. So that's another accusation by these countries. And don't forget, 3 of these countries are members, fellow members of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
And that's what's so confusing here. You would think that these Gulf states, which share so much of the same ideology, wouldn't differ this dramatically on their definition of terrorist groups in the region. How do they define their positions now? Well,
there is definitely, they share many similarities in terms of culture, religion, language. But there is a difference maybe in political ideology, in the way that Doha and Qatar has looked at the Arab Spring, for instance, since 2011. And I think there is a major difference in terms of how Al Jazeera, the international broadcaster and the Arabic broadcaster, which of course is financed by Doha, how that looks at the Arab Spring. And of course, it's given a base and support for the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. And these organizations are seen as terrorist organizations even outside the Middle East, you know, in the United States and Europe. And of course, the belligerent language that's been used by Saudi Arabia, by Egypt, and of course the events in Egypt itself a few years ago, all this shows that there is a different approach to the Arab Spring in Qatar to what we've seen in some of the other, mostly Arab Sunni states. And you know, the latest player now is Yemen, and there will be real pressure on Kuwait and Oman, 2 other of the GCC members. But it does show a different approach. And maybe, perhaps, these countries are emboldened now because of Donald Trump visiting the region 10 days ago and actually pointing that accusing figure towards Iran, saying, you know, this is a major destabilizing factor in the region.
And that leads to my next question. Who could potentially intervene at this point to help de-escalate these tensions? Is there a role for the United States? Is there a role for Turkey, which has cordial relationships with almost every player in this equation?
Well, we'll come to Turkey finally, because Turkey is a really important player and has important connections with Qatar. But first of all, the Americans, where does the Americans really stand? It wants to be entrenched in that battle with Daesh. What are the Russians doing in terms of Syria? And both of those countries definitely want to have some kind of influence in that region. You could argue that Russia's influence is on the increase, the American influence is waning. Back to Turkey. Turkey is in a very important position geographically, geopolitically, but also has very close connections to Doha. It's building a permanent military base in Qatar. It has 150 soldiers there at the moment, we're told, and that will grow. Potentially up to 3,000 soldiers could be based there once this permanent base is finished. But more than that, there are very close business connections with Qatar. We're told officially by the government, $8.5 billion worth of construction deals have been done. We're told unofficially, you read other reports, it's up to 15 billion. Very, very close connection. So that puts Turkey in a position to talk to Qatar, but it also makes it difficult politically for Turkey in terms of the wider region. So we'll see how that influence plays out.
Okay, Iolo, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for coming in.